Hello, I'm Annette Young and welcome back to the 51%er show about women reshaping our world. It's nearly a year since the MeToo campaign first emerged, and to kick off a brand new series, we're asking what governments and companies need to be doing to address sexual harassment in the workplace. But first, American actor and producer David Schwimmer and filmmaker Sigal Lavin have made a series of powerful public service announcements illustrating how sexual harassment can take on many forms. Let's take a look.
It's a big responsibility.
Oh, it's huge. I know, it's huge.
And the salary.
Oh my god, yes.
Right?
I mean, like, I was about to move in with my parents, and right before, so this saved me.
I really believe in you, you know?
Thank you. It's nice to hear that from someone.
These are cool. Did you, what did you...
Now watching that with me here in the studio is Fanny Petitbon, an advocacy manager for the NGO Care France. And from London, Sam Smethers, the CEO of the Fawcett Society, a leading charity campaigning for gender equality and women's rights in the UK. Thanks to both of you for joining me today. Sam, let me start with you. Sexual harassment takes on many forms in the workplace, but many still struggle with recognising this. So how do you, in fact, change cultural mindsets that still accept such behaviour as the norm?
Well, I think you're absolutely right to say it's often been seen as just normal stuff, and that's what we've seen over the last year, is just exploding that myth that it's something that women just have to put up with and treat as normality in the workplace, when it's anything but what they should have to accept as normal. So I think it has required really going back to basics and challenging some of those myths and saying that this just isn't acceptable behaviour, particularly in the 21st century. And, you know, it can be very, very subtle. I mean, you know, that clip we've just shown, it concludes with something very obvious, and he kisses her, you know, but really we're talking about something much more subtle than that. You know, the kind of physical contact, the images displayed in the workplace. It's about the woman's right to be free from harassment, that dignity at work, her right to that, which is the starting point. And really, our workplaces have started completely in the wrong place. So it's quite a big shift in thinking and culture change that we need to achieve.
But Fanny, there are still many shades of grey, aren't there?
Yeah, there are. And what Care think about it is that none of it is acceptable. Whether we think it's a light touch on a woman's hair or a woman's body, or strong physical abuse, sexual violence or harassment does not fit in anybody's job description. So it's really everybody's responsibility from a really early stage on, from the way we raise our children, boys and girls, about the fact that violence is not acceptable, whether at home, at school, at sport practice, or at the workplace. But it's also about spreading the word among families, among friends, and ensuring that companies really take the issue seriously.
Sam, your organisation recently made a submission to a UK parliamentary inquiry on sexual harassment, saying, among many things, that employers and regulators have ignored their responsibilities for far too long. How do you get governments and businesses on board to realise that steps do in fact need to be taken?
Well, I think there are a number of ways. Firstly, in terms of persuasion, you know, there is a real business cost here to sexual harassment, because if it's a harassment and bullying culture, that undermines the performance of teams. There's a real loss to the business. So, you know, if they're not persuaded by the intrinsic kind of importance to the individual woman and her welfare, and if they're not persuaded by arguments of equality, there is a bottom line argument which can be quite persuasive. But we would also go further to say that it's time to place a duty on employers to prevent harassment, to say we have to go from responding to the individual complaint to actually a more proactive approach, because it's only then that they'll take ownership of the culture that they're fostering in their workplaces and really try to prevent it in the first place.
Fanny, we now have a government here in France that is at least working to address sexual harassment in the street. But what is being done in terms of dealing with it in the workforce?
Well, to be honest, it's very limited. In France, employers have the responsibility to ensure the physical and mental health of employees, but 82% of them have done nothing, absolutely nothing, to put in place measures to prevent harassment. So there is this legal vacuum, but the situation in France is actually not isolated. It's the same in many countries across the world. And there's a legal vacuum. More than 1/3 of the world countries still do not have any legislation to fight sexual harassment. So CARE is advocating for the International Labour Organization to actually adopt the first ever global convention on ending such violence and harassment at the workplace for both men and women, but taking into account that women bear the brunt of the impact of sexual harassment.
Fanny, I want to ask you, and I also want to ask Sam this too, just how widespread a problem is it, given that we are in the 21st century? And as a result of the MeToo campaign, has anything actually changed?
Well, actually, in France, 1 in 3 women says that she has experienced sexual violence at some point during her professional career, and it's nearly 1 in 2 worldwide. So it's widely spread. I think some people say, some surveys says that the figures have increased. I'm not sure behaviors have changed in terms of actually harassing more people. But I think the Me Too campaign and Time Is Up movement have really opened up a space for women to speak up about this. So we really see that it's out there. The debate is out there, but there's still a long way to go. And so now we need everybody's responsibility, including companies, to really take concrete actions.
Sam, let me come back to you. Businesses alike are still failing to be accountable on this issue. So how do you change that?
Women are being put under pressure to sign non-disclosure agreements and quietly go away, rather than the organisations confronting the problem that they actually have in their own organisation. So I think it's really important that we think about how the organisation itself is responding, but I think really it's partly motivating them by saying this is about the performance of your business and your organisation, but also putting additional requirements on them, so a bit of carrot and a bit of stick to try and drive that change.
Fanny, one columnist recently wrote that to end sexual harassment in the workplace, that all you need to do is simply hire more women and promote them to senior levels of management. Is it really as easy as that?
No, actually, well, it's important to have more women in senior positions, of course, because we know there's a glass ceiling. But really what we need is a change at the society level. So we really need to tackle social norms, and we really need to reinvent them, really saying that no sort of violence is acceptable. And that is really important, because we're talking about the workplace, but this happens, on the street, it happens at home. So we need to have a global change, and we really need to have companies on board. And as Sam was saying, they need to understand that even though it might feel as an additional obligation, it's actually in their own interest. Because if you create a healthy and safe environment, talented people will stay. They will stay on. They will feel that it's okay to work, and that their work is valued, and you will increase your productivity. So it's not just an additional obligation, but it's actually an added value for everyone.
Sam, briefly, what measures need to be put in place in order to bring about this change? And as Fanny just mentioned, they're changing social norms.
Well, definitely we would want to see an additional requirement on employers to prevent harassment and abuse. We think that is fundamental to really driving that culture shift, and then they'd have to be accountable for that. There's a report on what they've done to actively prevent it. I think there's also more that could be done to really monitor and narrow down the ways in which non-disclosure agreements are used in the workplace, for example. And really we need to put more in place to support employers as well. So I think it's a bit of both. It's a bit of additional requirement, but also support so they really know how to deal with it. Because I think there's genuine confusion on the part of some employers. What do we do? What's the right thing to do in this situation? And sexual harassment covers a whole range of behaviours. Fundamentally it's about a power imbalance, but it's a range of behaviours from very moderate, almost marginal kind of things. You're not quite sure, is it harassment or not, all the way through to sexual assault and criminal offences. And so I think it does require some support for employers to help them to get it right, but equally we really do have to say to them, this is an expectation, you've got a part to play here.
Yeah, and this is why the global convention would be really helpful, because the idea would be to have a legally binding instrument, a framework with a common definition of violence, a common definition of harassment, and really that protects a whole range of workers, people working full-time, part-time, people working from home, working from regular offices, people working on the street. We don't need to have two different practices. We need to make sure everybody aligns on it. So really what Sam was saying about providing the tools is really, really important.
Fanny, do you think there will ever come a day where sexual harassment will be eliminated from society?
Well, I do hope so, but it will take time. Change does not happen overnight. And it really starts with us. We need to feel all responsible. Us as parents, as friends, as relatives, we all have a word to say that, you know, violence cannot be accepted, and we need to speak up, and we need to be respectful of others.
And Sam, what are your thoughts on that question? Do you think there will come a time where it will no longer be an issue?
We absolutely have to believe that's possible because, you know, all the changes that women have secured, certainly over the last 150 years in the UK, started off by someone, usually a woman, believing it was possible. And, you know, we wouldn't have got the vote, we wouldn't have got all the changes we've secured in terms of legislative change if some woman hadn't thought of it, dreamt it up and fought for it. And so we've got to do that too with this issue. But I really do believe we can drive change. And, you know, otherwise what are we saying? That we're consigning ourselves to accepting this behaviour for the foreseeable future? No, you know, we have to say it's different, it can be different, it can be possible.
I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. I want to thank my guests, that being, of course, Sam Smethers from the Fawcett Society in London and also Fanny Petitbon from CARE France. Thanks to both of you for giving me your time. And that's it for now, and you can connect with us via our Facebook page, that of course being France24.51%, or do send us a tweet at _51%. Do keep those comments and story ideas rolling in, and until our next show, bye for now.